Era+Shuangwen+Generations+System+Space applies, after living for 23 years, was suddenly reminded by the system that I actually belonged to the 1980s. Yunqing got stuck in his hands and began to crazily buy and hoard supplies. When I woke up and walked back to the era of scarce supplies, I found out that I was actually the ancestor of the village. The younger generation is filial and respected by everyone, even the original female protagonist is their own little follower. Originally, Yunqing wanted to be a salted fish in this world with the supplies of space, but as he watched the village's downfall and the system's prompt of death, he decided to work hard to earn money and lead the young people in the village to a well-off society. Just, what's going on with the man behind him who wears glasses and looks like a cultured scumbag? Why are you following her? Hello, please speak up and don't touch your manual feet. Keywords of the novel. Returning to the era as an old ancestor without a pop-up window, returning to the era as an old ancestor. Download the complete set of TXT, returning to the era as an old ancestor. Latest chapters for reading. Chapter 1. Before wearing books. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Before wearing books. Yunqing had just woken up, and before his mind could fully recover, he heard the long-lost sound of the system ringing in his mind. Host, the space has been opened, and you will return to your own world in 10 days. Now we are entering the countdown of 9 days and 20.3 hours. The cold and emotionless mechanical sound echoed clearly in Yunqing's mind. This startled Yunqing, who had not yet woken up, and his eyes suddenly opened. There was no drowsiness on the face, only a dull state remained. In a daze, a very brief moment seemed to flash before her eyes. In the clip, she seems to have seen a village, similar to those in the 1970s and 1980s. The village is full of earthen houses, and there are still a few people wearing gray clothes walking by. Just as Yunqing was about to see clearly, the scene disappeared, as if it were just an illusion. But intuition told her that it was not an illusion. Yunqing regained his senses and remembered what had just happened, suppressing his doubts. This dog system finally appeared, and for over a decade, she almost thought it was dead. She hasn't started asking yet. I heard the emotionless mechanical voice in my mind saying, "Black card activated, valid for 9 days and 20.3 hours. Yun's eyes lit up with emotion. As soon as the blanket was lifted, I stepped on the cold floor without even putting on my shoes, and then began to rummage through the boxes and cabinets. Finally, she found the black card in the system port in a broken wallet that she had not used for many years. You should know that there is a string of thieves and thieves inside, all of which are money. She has been poor for 23 years, and finally she can use them. There is a hint of anticipation in her heart, but also a hint of crisis. If it is really the 1970s or 1980s, then she needs to prepare a lot of things. In addition to a black card, Yunqing also dug out a slightly yellowish paper from his broken wallet. That's all the things she wrote about buying before. But it's probably not needed at this moment. Yunqing held the black card, his hands trembling uncontrollably, which was a reaction of excitement and happiness. A smile couldn't be controlled at the corner of the mouth. Yunqing held his phone and bound it to the card, then wrote down everything he thought of in a memo. I searched for some information online, placed an order, and it took 9 days for the package to be delivered. After buying, there are still some things that cannot be bought too much online, so one can only go to wholesale markets or shops to buy. It's still morning now, with plenty of time. She has a whole day today to prepare. After finishing it, Yunqing remembered that she almost forgot about the space and was thinking about how to get in. The next second, she disappeared into the chair. Entering the space, it was very large and almost impossible to see the end. Yunqing turned around in place and roughly looked at the space, dividing it into several areas and wiring. Freshness preservation area, freezing area, time static area, and another planting area. Spring water area, as well as aquaculture area. What region is it? Is this telling her that space can grow things? Wow, these golden fingers are big enough to be used for her early retirement. What else is she afraid of with this thing? After taking inventory, Yunqing first made space and ordered a takeout. With enough money, he immediately chose a big meal. During the waiting process, she quickly began searching for strategies. Don't ask why she knew. She had been dreaming of a place in the 1970s and 1980s for the past few days, and didn't think much at first. After all, I've been following the era of literature lately, so it's a bit of a fantasy. At this moment, the dog system came out and said she was going back, relying on her years of keen intuition to tell her that this matter was not easy. Simply search for things related to the era. Plus a little information that I have at my disposal. Yunqing searched for information while recording. Half an hour later, the paper was packed with everything she needed to prepare for the next few days. Yunqing felt a headache subconsciously as he looked at so many things to prepare. However, she quickly came up with a solution. Let's rent a warehouse first. She remembers hearing from her roommate before that her relatives are still classmates who specialize in animal husbandry. You can ask them later and save a lot of trouble. You can go to the wholesale market to see the rest. Do whatever you say, put on your clothes and put on a beautiful makeup. Just as the delivery arrived, after breakfast, Yunqing left with a small bag, phone, and card. It took 2 hours to find a remote warehouse and rent it for a few days. Then I rented a car from a car dealership and headed to the wholesale market. Yunqing was not in a hurry to buy, so he took a stroll and inquired about the prices of various stores. Then I looked at their goods and compared them before seriously negotiating prices with the boss and discussing the quantity of goods I needed. At first, the bosses thought Yunqing was joking with them. After all, the quantity she wanted started with tons. Whether it's rice or anything, it starts with a ton. Yunqing managed to convince them at least by paying a deposit and leaving an address and phone number, and it was only then that several bosses fully believed him. Due to the large quantity, it cannot be completed in a day and requires several consecutive days of transportation to the warehouse. She has bought a lot of things, including rice, millet, various types of noodles, snacks, and beverages. She has bought everything she can at the wholesale market. She didn't even let go of the sewing machine and bought about 10, all of which are electric for foot movement. Not to mention other miscellaneous things. A trip to the wholesale market was almost done. Yunqing went to the mother and baby store again to buy all the things for children. The same excuse was that the family was going to open a chain supermarket, which also opened at the same time and urgently needed goods. I bought bottles, formula, and small clothes, as well as various styles and sizes of diapers. After finishing, I left the warehouse address and my own phone number, gave money, and left. After leaving the mother and baby store, Yunqing went to the beauty counter and selected a variety of skincare products and cosmetics. He didn't use too many of these things, so he didn't order too many. At the end of the day, Yunqing felt that his entire leg was almost broken. I found a high-end restaurant, had dinner, and then went home. I quickly took a shower, took off my makeup, and fell asleep. She set the alarm on her phone and woke her up at 4:30 in the morning. She had to go to the warehouse to collect things, otherwise she wouldn't be able to put them down. Yunqing sat up and walked to the bathroom in a daze, washed his face, brushed his teeth, and simply took care of his skin before changing clothes and leaving. When they arrived, all the delivery and unloading personnel had left. Yunqing opened the warehouse door and walked in to sort and store everything in the space. Then I drove back. Returning home and seeing that it was still early, I took another nap. When I woke up again, it was 9:30 in the morning. After having breakfast, Yunqing went to a sea area outside the city center. I ordered a large quantity of seafood, paid a deposit and left my phone address before leaving. Returning to the city, Mo Yunqing strolled around all the steamed bun and noodle shops, selected the ones she thought were delicious, ordered food from them for the next few days, and gave them a deposit and phone address before going home. Day 3, the fourth day. The things she bought online have also gradually arrived. On the fifth day, Mo Yunqing browsed through all of his classmates' social media and found a few who were engaged in animal husbandry and fruit tree cultivation at their homes. I found the phone number they left behind for advertising on their social media. Tip: this book is not written by a female lead author, please read the female lead article carefully. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Wearing Books, Ancestors. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Wearing Books, Ancestors. Mo Yunqing wrote down their phone numbers. I first dialed the phone number of my classmates who are raising livestock at home. The next few classmates are all the same. Also, after providing the deposit, contact phone number, and warehouse address. After taking a look at the items on the list and confirming that there were no omissions, I breathed a sigh of relief in my heart. Mo Yunqing hurriedly went out to the warehouse to collect things. In the next few days, Mo Yunqing could almost be said to be doing the same thing repeatedly every day. Every day, I come back exhausted and fall asleep. Finally, on the 9th day, everything was packed into the space. Mo Yunqing finally relaxed. Looking at the bank card, there are still a few thousand yuan left. Inexplicably relieved, lying in bed enjoying the last moments of staying here. Mo Yunqing lay on the kong, her face a bit pale, she didn't even know when she had put it on. She only remembers waiting last night when she suddenly fell asleep and woke up here. At this moment, she was feeling dizzy and had a strange memory in her mind. It is a brief memory of a little girl for over a decade. This little girl, that is, her parents have both passed away, and she is the only one in the family. The identity of a little girl is not simple, but she has a large generation despite her young age. From the elderly in their 70s and 80s to the newborn baby in the entire Magia village, they all call her Old Ancestor. It is now 72 years, which is the early 1970s, an era where tickets are required everywhere. Yesterday when I was working, I fainted from heatstroke and was brought back by the villagers. After relieving her of the heat, I took care of her anxiously all night and only left this morning. Not long after the person left, Mo Yunqing woke up. Mo Yunqing lay on the kong, looking at the roof, his heart was actually a bit complicated. In modern life, she had no father or mother. After returning to her own world, she still had no father or mother. Not only that, the world she is in is also the world of novels, and she is just an elder female lead with limited roles in the world of novels. The female protagonist of the world is a little girl who grew up next door with her, 2 years younger than her, and is 15 years younger this year. She is the only daughter in the other party's family, with 2 older brothers above her. Her parents are still alive, and her parents dote on her, while her older brother also dotes on her. She is a sweet and literary female lead in a safe era. Compared with the original, it is a little pathetic. There is no father, no mother, and no brothers and sisters. Fortunately, most people in the village take good care of their native habitat, although not all of them. She only found out here that she was a character from a novel. Mo Yunqing's tone was calm and he asked, "System, is that why you didn't tell me?" The dog System came with an apologetic voice. "I'm sorry, host, all the system can do is protect the host." Mo Yunqing actually understands why the system didn't tell her before, it's just that she's afraid of being hurt. After all, she's a living person in modern times. Suddenly, someone tells you, you're a paper figure in a novel. What would you think? The system hides many things from her, but it cannot be denied that she is really good to herself. Now that I know, it doesn't seem so difficult to accept. After a while, Mo Yunqing asked, "What do I need to do?" The system says, the host doesn't need to do anything, just live well and live their own life. After speaking, I couldn't help feeling a little more guilty in my heart. After all, I watched myself grow up. Mo Yunqing was momentarily stunned, with a hint of confusion in his eyes. He murmured, "Live your own life well." The system remained silent for a moment and said, "According to the plot, when the host is 18 years old, there will be a calamity. The host only needs to avoid the calamity." Mo Yunqing was stunned and said, "Deadly calamity." The system said seriously, "Yes, but the host doesn't have to be afraid. With the system in place, the system will protect the host and no one can harm it." A hint of warmth flashed through Mo Yunqing's heart, and his pale lips pulled out a smile. "I believe you." The system was stunned for a moment, and suddenly there was a faint pink glow on the ice-blue virtual interface in the space. But in a moment, a cold blue glow returned. After lying on the Kong for a while, Mo Yunqing felt a hunger in her stomach, which made it difficult for her to lie down. She propped herself up on the Kong, feeling dizzy and weak. But Mo Yunqing still persevered and disappeared into the room. Entering the space, perhaps due to psychological effects, Mo Yunqing felt that he had some strength on his body. After finding toiletries, he washed himself up and down, inside and outside, and changed into his clean personal clothes, as well as clean clothes. He ate and drank enough before leaving the space. Returning to her room, she changed into old clothes that had been washed clean and put her clothes into the space. Just as I finished, I heard a system reminder saying, "Someone is here, host." Mo Yunqing was momentarily stunned, then sat on the Kong with her dirty clothes lying next to her. A woman walked in from outside, and Mo Yunqing knew who she was in his memory. The daughter-in-law of the head of Majia village. Hong Fengying, the daughter-in-law of the village chief, is a middle-aged woman in her 50s. Seeing Mo Yunqing wake up, a smile immediately appeared on his face. He quickly walked over and said, "Ancestor, you're awake. You're hungry. I've brought you food." Mo Yunqing nodded and whispered, "Thank you." Seeing her clothes on the Kong and slightly damp hair, the village chief's wife didn't think much, thinking that Mo Yunqing had changed clothes from sweating. The village chief's daughter-in-law placed her things on the table and walked up to Mo Yunqing. She reached out and touched her forehead, asking with concern, "Your words are beyond our expectations, my dear ancestor. Are you still feeling dizzy? How is your health? Is there any discomfort?" Mo Yunqing shook his head slightly and said with a light smile, "It's much better. Besides feeling a bit dizzy, I can't work hard on my body, so there's nothing uncomfortable." After listening, the village chief's daughter-in-law smiled and said, "That's good. The village doctor said that your situation is normal, just rest well for a few days." Mo Yun sighed with emotion. The village head's daughter-in-law took out a bowl of sweet potato congee from the basket she brought, and put a pickle and a vegetable on the table. Helping Mo Yunqing walk over and sit down, he said, "You haven't eaten anything since yesterday, are you starving?" Mo Yunqing just drank a bottle of milk and ate some meat porridge. Now he is not hungry. However, she still ate a few mouthfuls of sweet potato congee and 2 chopsticks of vegetables and pickles, so she couldn't eat any more. The village chief's wife looked at Mo Yunqing not eating much and felt extremely sorry, but considering that she was not feeling well and couldn't eat, she didn't force her to eat again. "I'll put congee in the basket. If you are hungry, get up and eat some." Mo Yunqing nodded and whispered, "Okay." The village chief's wife said anxiously, "Then I'll go ahead and get busy. If there's anything uncomfortable, just go to the door and shout out. I'll let my few children play at the door." Mo Yunqing nodded with a faint smile and said, "Okay." The village chief's wife just left and closed the door by the way. Due to physical discomfort, Mo Yunqing felt even more tired after eating. He walked to the other side of the Kong and lay down, and soon fell asleep again. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Deadly Robbery. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3 Deadly Robbery. During this period, someone came in to see her and saw her sleeping, so they didn't disturb her. Yunqing slept for quite a long time until it was almost dark before waking up. After sleeping for a while, I was sweating all over, but my body felt a lot more comfortable. The room was a bit dark, and Yunqing took a bottle of water from the space and took a few sips to smooth his throat before finally finding a kerosene lamp from the nearby Kong cabinet. Using matches to light up the kerosene lamp, the originally dim room lit up quite a bit. The basket that was originally placed on the table is missing. Yunqing speculates that it may have been while she was sleeping when the village chief's wife came to retrieve it. Just as Yunqing was thinking, footsteps came from outside, and it seemed like there was more than one person. Yunqing looked at the door and quickly pushed it open. The first one to come was the village chief's wife, followed by the village chief, as well as the captain and the captain's wife. The village chief asked with concern, "Patriarch, have you woken up? Are you feeling better now?" Captain and the others looked at her with the same concern. Yunqing's face is still a bit uncomfortable, but he is more energetic than during the day. "A lot better. Why did you come together?" The village chief's wife said, "When I came this afternoon, you were resting. I told them to come back later." Yunqing nodded. The village head's daughter-in-law put the basket on the table and took out the food from the basket. It was still sweet potato congee. The food was better than that in the daytime. It was a bit meaty. It should have been specially made for her. "I only had that little lunch, I'm starving now. I've brought you something to eat." Yunqing nodded, got off the Kong, walked to the chair next to the table, and sat down. They four watched her eat alone. During this period, she said some things that she didn't understand. After she finished eating, the village daughter-in-law put away the dishes and said a few words to Yunqing before they left. Shortly after the captain and his team left, someone knocked on the door. Yunqing walked out in confusion and opened the door. Standing outside the door was a little girl about her age, with a childish expression on her face and a smile on her face. With a slightly soft voice, he said, "Ancestor, look what I've brought you." At first glance, Yunqing knew who she was, and she was the female lead Chu. Looking down at her hand, there were 2 bird eggs lying in her palm. A hint of warmth flashed in Yunqing's eyes and he smiled lightly, saying, "You keep it and eat." Chu handed the bird eggs forward and said with a smile, "I have eaten them. Today, I climbed the tree and found 2 nests, and found 7 bird eggs. These 2 are for you." When Yunqing heard her say she was climbing a tree, he laughed in silence and raised his hand to touch her little head, looking at her with a touch of gentleness in his eyes. "You climbed the tree again." Chu placed the bird egg in Yunqing's hand, and his small face faintly showed a hint of redness. With a hint of shyness, he said, "It's getting late, I won't disturb my ancestors' rest. Remember to eat, I'll go back first, and I'll come back to find you tomorrow." After finishing speaking, he ran back home, and the 2 families were only a few steps away. Yunqing looked at the 2 still warm bird eggs in his hand, and then looked at Chu, who had long disappeared. Helplessly smiled, then turned around and closed the door. Shortly after she closed the door, 3 teenagers walked out of the darkness. One of the teenagers said with a hint of emotion, "The little girls in the countryside are pure and innocent." Another young man agreed and said, "Yes, unlike those in the courtyard, there are many intrigues at a young age." The other one didn't speak, but looked at the tightly closed door. A few seconds later, he withdrew his gaze and said in a faint tone, "Go back, it's getting late." After speaking, he strode forward with a shooting star. The other 2 teenagers shrugged and left along. They are all 3 educated youth going to the countryside. Coming from the same place and growing up together since childhood. After returning to the room, Yunqing blew out the kerosene lamp, took out a flashlight from the space, and placed it on top of the large wooden box in the Kong cabinet. The light illuminates the entire Kong. Yunqing dismantled all the things on the Kong, cleaned them up, and replaced them with clean and the same colored items on the Kong. Take the replaced items outside and put them in the wooden basin for laundry. It's difficult to deal with things in the middle of the night, so we'll just wait until tomorrow. After finishing, Yunqing took a shower in the space before coming out. He slept too much during the day and couldn't sleep at night. Yunqing lay in bed, turned off the flashlight, took out the electric fan and set it aside to blow. Staring blankly at the pitch-black roof, he shouted, "System! System! Host, I am here." Yunqing asked, "Who is the male lead?" The system said, "Tingyu, from Beijing, with a red background, is currently working as an educated youth in the village." After a moment of silence, Yunqing asked, "So the beginning of the relationship between the male and female leads is in the village, right?" System. Yes. Yunqing remained silent for a while before asking, "Is my calamity related to them?" System. Unrelated. After hearing the system say, "unrelated," Yunqing breathed a sigh of relief in his heart. She saw in her memory that Chu really treated her like his sister, disregarding the issue of seniority. Chu had loved to stick to her since childhood, and she really didn't want her fate to be related to her. Otherwise, how can we get along again in the future? And this little girl often called her sister when she was a child. Yunqing asked again, "Can I know why I died?" The system remained silent for a while before saying, "The timing hasn't arrived yet, I'm sorry, host." Yunqing was stunned for a moment and didn't ask further. After an unknown amount of time, Yunqing's even breath came from the pitch-black and quiet room. Early the next morning, Yun woke up at dawn. "When I woke up at dawn, I didn't feel as lethargic, soft, and weak as I did yesterday." After washing, Yunqing took out milk and a beef congee from the space and solved the problem after breakfast. Yunqing just walked out of the room. It was dark yesterday, and she didn't even have time to look at what her home looked like. At this moment, the yard is not big, with 2 rooms, one for her and the other for her deceased parents. Then there is a kitchen, a firewood room, and a toilet, dry toilet, for bathing. Next to the kitchen is a small private plot, where vegetables are grown. At the entrance of the kitchen, there is a well where all the water is pumped. The structure of the entire home forms a 7-dot-shaped Arabic numeral. On both sides of the gate are earthen walls, with clothes-drying poles built under the corners. After reading it, Yunqing was still very satisfied. Living on my own, not adjacent to other people's homes, I won't be noticed if I close the door and want to eat anything. The hostess's house is located next door, not far away, and there is a small path between the 2 families. After surveying, Yunqing returned to the room and opened the window for ventilation, along with opening the door. Then walk to the next door and open all the windows and doors. After a simple cleaning, take out the bedding to dry. While tidying up his deceased parents' room, Yunqing found 3 jade pendants from a hole under the Kong cabinet, each with a character on it. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Jade Pendant. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4 Jade Pendant. Yunqing placed these 3 pieces of jade on the Kong, wiped off the dust on them, and read the words on them clearly. Heng, Yu, Qing. Yunqing's first reaction was that this was the last character of her parents' name, and another was the last character of her own name. Yunqing murmured softly, Peheng, Yunqinyu, Yunqing. It happens to be the last character of these 3 names. Take the jade pendant in your hand, it feels icy cold to the touch, and this type of jade pendant is generally impossible for others to possess. I don't know where her parents came from, and they even engraved their names. In addition to this jade pendant, there is also some money and a nationwide grain receipt. I have a doubt in my heart, but looking back on all the memories in my mind, I have no solution and can only keep the doubt in my heart. After putting the jade pendant and money receipt into the space, go outside and fetch water from the well for the dismantled items. Take out a certain brand of laundry detergent from the space and pour it in, soak it in water for a while. While it's still early, wash the bedding and clothes that were changed yesterday and hang them up. Just as I finished, I heard a knocking outside the door. Yunqing pounded his waist and walked to the door to open it. When I opened the door, I saw Chuchu's bright smile. Ancestors. Yunqing smiled helplessly and said, "Come in." Chuchu walked in carrying his own rations. Seeing the clothes and bedding dripping in the yard, she looked at her with some disapproval and a tone of concern. "Grandfather, your health is not good yet. Why did you wash so much in the morning?" Yunqing smiled and said, "It's much better. After lying down for so long, I didn't take advantage of the good weather and free time to wash everything." At the same time, I also felt a sigh in my heart, as the female protagonist truly cared for her elder from the bottom of her heart. Chuchu let out a sigh. She was too familiar with the temper of her old ancestor, just afraid of trouble for everyone. With a hint of resentment in his tone, he said, "Then you can wait for me to come over and I'll help you. It won't be so tiring." Yunqing took her words to heart and smiled with a hint of perfunctory tone, saying, "I will definitely do it next time." Chuchu could tell at a glance that she was being perfunctory, always doing this, which was too heartbreaking for her. "You always say that." Yunqing touched her nose, unable to match her original personality, temperament, and speech in every aspect. "So she doesn't have to go to school specifically." Yunqing lightly patted Chuchu's small head and silently sighed. "She is truly the female lead, her hair is really soft, and her hand feel is really good." Yunqing looked at the basket she was holding in her hand and playfully said with a slight frown, "Bring all the rations here. It seems that you are planning to stay at my house all day today." Chuchu snorted twice and said seriously, "Village chief, I told the captain to keep an eye on you. If you don't pay attention, you'll run out." In Yunqing's mind, a subconscious image emerged of him getting sick a few times before and just landing on the ground. "I don't know why I feel guilty." Chuchu noticed the change in Yunqing's expression and deliberately said, "You didn't go to work this time, but there are quite a few clothes and bedding hanging in the yard." The last three words were slightly bit heavy. Yunqing paused his hand, touched his nose, and said stiffly, "I don't have time on weekdays." Chuchu remained silent, carrying something into the room and placing it on the table. He turned around and looked at her with a pair of bright eyes, which added a hint of accusation and said, "Excuse me. Yunqing. Okay, it's true, but it's not good to say it so directly." Seeing Yunqing not speaking, Chuchu bulged his face and said, "Next time you do this again, I really will get angry." Yunqing blinked his eyes and wanted to say, "You've said this sentence many times, from small to large, there are not hundreds to thousands, but it's actually not very credible." But seeing that she was really a bit angry, he followed her and nodded seriously, "Okay, there must be no next time." Chuchu looked at her for a while and saw that she was speaking very seriously. "I won't be angry anymore." Then he immediately changed his appearance and pulled Yunqing with a happy expression, saying, "When I first came over, I saw 3 good-looking male-educated youth in the village." Yun asked subconsciously, "How beautiful it is." Coincidentally, Yunqing really doesn't have any memories. Chuchu thought for a moment and said, "It looks better than my brother." Yunqing. Chuchu has 2 older brothers. Ligua is over 1.8 meters tall, with a wheat-colored skin and a determined face. The younger generation in the village is not only capable but also outstanding. My second brother, Moyen, is also a tall man over 1.8 meters tall, with a wheat-colored skin. He is a boy who loves to laugh. His appearance is not inferior to that of his older brother. Mo Yunqing jokingly said, if your words are to be heard by your brothers, they will probably be sad. Mo Chu stuck out his tongue and smiled with a hint of guilt. I'm telling the truth, my brother is just a bit dark, and if he's white, he looks really nice. Mo Yunqing couldn't help but laugh, turned around and went to the kitchen to wash a bowl. She didn't even boil water in the kettle at the moment, so she could only get some mineral water from the space, pour it in, and then bring it to the room to pour a bowl of water for Mo Chu. Mo Yunqing pretended to ask casually, is there anything you like? Mo Chu looked bewildered and said, what do you like? Mo Yunqing paused for a moment and said, what are you talking about? Mo Chu's face instantly turned red, and his eyes widened as he looked at Mo Yunqing. Patriarch, what are you thinking? Mo Yunqing touched his nose and said, harm, what's the point here? Mo Chu was too shy to speak. Mo Yunqing saw her blush like a ripe crab and changed the topic, saying, all right, I won't tease you anymore. Let's go to the mountains to pick up some firewood later. There's nothing left at home. Upon hearing that Mo Yunqing was going to the mountains, Mo Chu immediately stopped blushing and looked at her seriously. No, you had heatstroke a day ago and can't go out to dry. I'll go talk to my brother and his team about firewood at noon and ask them to help you get some back when they finish work in the afternoon. Mo Yunqing felt that she could resist a bit, but judging from her appearance, it probably wouldn't work. Helplessly, he could only sigh and take a step back, saying, is it okay to go out for a walk? Mo Chu wanted to say no, but when he saw Mo Yunqing looking at her with a pitiful expression on his face. As soon as his heart softened, he nodded and agreed, okay. Then he added, let's go for a walk and then come back, otherwise the sun will be too hot for a while. Mo Yunqing nodded and the two walked out. Mo Chu took a straw hat from under the eaves and placed it on Mo Yunqing's head. You haven't fully recovered from heatstroke yet, so it's better to wear a hat. Mo Yunqing nodded helplessly and said, okay, I'll listen to you. The feeling of being cared for by others is actually quite good. The two girls walked out, with similar heights and figures, except that Mo Yunqing was slightly taller and slimmer than Mo Chu. Just as I walked a short distance, I saw a tall boy who was 1.8 meters tall and looked quite young. He was wearing a straw hat, carrying a hoe on his shoulder, and holding a dog-tail grass at the corner of his mouth. He walked over. Mo Yunqing had never seen this person in his memory, so his eyes looked at him with a hint of doubt. As he approached, he heard the boy with a slight smile on his lips shouting to Mo Chu, Miss Mo. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Male lead Tingyu. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Male lead Tingyu. Mo Chu was stunned for a moment and nodded, Tingyu. Tingyu looked at Mo Yunqing beside Mo Chu with a hint of doubt in his eyes. Who is this? Mo Chu said, Ancestor. At this point, the system told Mo Yunqing. Host, he is the male lead. Mo Yunqing was slightly stunned for a moment, then glanced at Tingyu without any trace and gave a fair evaluation. He looks really good. Tingyu was stunned for a moment, with a pair of passionate peach blossom eyes, looking at Mo Yunqing and thinking to herself. It turned out she was the teenage ancestor of the Mo family village. Tingyu nodded at Mo Yunqing and said, hello, Miss Mo. Mo Yunqing nodded slightly and said in a faint voice, hello, Tingyu. Tingyu greeted them and left. Mo Yunqing watched as Tingyu walked away and asked, how did you get to know him? When Mo Yunqing asked this question, a hint of gossip flashed in his eyes. There's no other way, who can make her know nothing about the plot of the male and female protagonists besides knowing her own plot. Mo Chu didn't think much and said calmly, I don't really know him, I just helped him a few times. Mo Yunqing raised his eyebrows slightly and helped a few times. It seems that the plot of the male and female protagonists has just begun. At this time, everyone in the village was working in the fields, and there was basically nothing left in the village, some of which were just children aged 3 or 4. The two of them walked in the village for a while, and basically walked all over the village. Yunqing was not a road enthusiast, and with his memories, he recognized them quickly. The sun had already risen high, and the stuffy and hot atmosphere filled the air. Mo Chu said, "Ancestor, let's go back. The sun is getting bigger and bigger." Mo Yunqing glanced at Mo Chu, who was sweating on his forehead, and nodded, "Okay." At this moment, they are also estimated to be getting off work soon. The noon sun is the most grinding, so they will finish work every time the sun is at its maximum. Wait until the sun is not as bright in the afternoon to go to work, and work will only end when it is getting dark. In the morning, I started working at dawn and didn't even have time to eat breakfast. They all come back from work in the scorching sun and have breakfast and lunch together. The harvest is not very good nowadays, and every household eats 2 meals, there is no such thing as 3 meals. When they were walking home, they happened to meet them at work. I saw Tingyu again, and there were 2 handsome guys beside him who I had never seen before. There is a man whose eyebrows are somewhat similar to his. Mo Yunqing just glanced lightly and then withdrew his gaze. Tingyu originally intended to say hello to Mo Chu, but considering that many people in the village were there at the moment, he didn't speak up and nodded to Mo Chu without a trace, which was considered a greeting. Mo Chu was stunned and nodded. "Patriarch, are you feeling much better now? Are you feeling dizzy or not? Is there anything uncomfortable? How did you come out for a walk on this hot day? You're not feeling well yet." Mo Yunqing was surrounded by the villagers, expressing their concern and greetings one by one. Mo Yunqing patiently replied, "It's much better now, and I don't feel dizzy anymore. After lying at home for a long time, I'll come out for a walk." After answering all the questions, everyone felt at ease and then reminded Mo Chu to take good care of Mo Yunqing. And Tingyu and the other 3 were completely ignored. Mo Yun's emotions were met with a gaze that fell on him, and he paused for a while before retracting it. They quickly dispersed and went home. And Tingyu and the others also left. Mo Chu and Mo Yunqing have also returned. Mo Yunqing felt cared for by so many people for the first time. How could she say this feeling in her heart? It was very unfamiliar, but it made her very happy. Mo Yunqing looked at it and saw that it was past 10 o'clock. "I'm hungry, let's cook and eat." Mo Chu nodded and touched his stomach, he was indeed hungry. In the kitchen, Mo Chu didn't have Mo Yunqing to take action, only letting her set fire. I deftly washed the rice, peeled the sweet potatoes, and put the rice together before cooking. I made a few potatoes and some vegetables, washed them clean, cut them, added some oil, and then flipped them over and stir-fried. Mo Yunqing looked at her nimble and skilled hands and feet, and knew she must do it frequently. Rural children take charge early on. A few-year-old child can basically do a lot of farm work, let alone a teenage girl. After finishing the cooking, they took things to the house. The congee was still very hot. Fortunately, there was cold water in the kettle. Get some congee into a bowl, add some cold water, and the temperature drops a lot. It won't be so hot to drink. Only oil and salt were added, and not too much oil was added, so the taste of the dish naturally wouldn't be as good. But if it's enough to fill the stomach, it's already good. After eating, Mo Chu naturally picked up the dishes and took them to wash. As for the remaining congee, he took it to the kitchen, put it on the edge of the stove, and covered it with a lid. Mo Yunqing never had a chance to intervene throughout, mainly because when she moved, Mo Chu pushed her back to the room. And she moves very quickly and does things with ease. It was done in no time. After putting things away, Mo Chu glanced at the scorching sun outside and said, "Patriarch, I'll go back first. I'll wake up later and come find you." Mo Yunqing said, "I'm fine. You can go to work this afternoon. I'm not feeling any discomfort at the moment, and I'm not going anywhere this afternoon. I'll just stay at home. Mo Chu looked at Mo Yunqing for a while and saw that she had indeed improved a lot. He hesitated for a moment and nodded, okay. She doesn't usually do much work, mainly cooking at home after work, so today she can be considered lazy. Mo Chu went back, and Mo Yunqing closed the door. After washing his hands and feet, he returned to his room and closed the door. I took out a fan and placed it on the Kong to blow at myself. After blowing for a while, I turned off the fan. After taking a shower in the space, I changed into a new outfit and finally got on the Kong. After lying down for a while, I found myself unable to sleep. Mo Yunqing took out her laptop from the space. After watching TV for a while and feeling drowsy, Mo Yunqing finally put away the computer. Pulling a corner of the bedding over her belly, she soon heard her even breathing sound. Educated youth points. Xiao Qindong asked, when did you meet the girl in the village? Tingyu looked at him with a puzzled expression and said, Xiao Qindong rolled his eyes and said, just now when you came back, you nodded and said hello to the other girl, and the other girl also nodded back to you. I can see it clearly. Tingyu paused and said, I'm not quite familiar with you either. You just helped me a few times when I first arrived. Xiao Qindong secretly glanced at Lingxu, who was sitting on the nearby Kong with his eyes closed and not speaking. Lingxu is Tingyu's uncle. Xiao Qindong saw that Lingxu remained motionless before whispering, You're lucky, kid. Tingyu gave him an elbow and said, Don't talk nonsense. Xiao Qindong let out a muffled pain and quickly said, I was joking with you. Tingyu furrowed his brows and spoke with a hint of seriousness, Don't ruin the reputation of the girl. Xiao Qindong had no choice but to speak in front of them. He didn't know how to handle things properly, and he just said it in front of them. This kid really took a heavy hit and said, My fault, my fault. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Climbing the Mountain. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6 Climbing the Mountain. Tingyu lay down and said, Alright, let's take a break. We still have to start work this afternoon. Xiao Qindong shrugged his shoulders but didn't say anything more. There are a total of 11 people in the Educated Youth Center, and 3 of them have a room. It's also convenient, except for 4 girls, there are 4 boys. There are not many educated youth, only 3 rooms, a kitchen, and a dry toilet. 2 rooms are for boys, and the other is for 4 girls. In the afternoon. When Mo Yunqing woke up, it was already past 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The congee I had drunk at 11:00 was almost digested by now. When I woke up, my stomach was a bit hungry. As expected, there were no oily dishes, and I really didn't feel hungry. And the body's appetite is not very good. I ate a small bowl of congee at noon. After Mo Yun became emotional, he went outside and rinsed his mouth with clean water and washed his face. At this moment, although the sun may not be as bright as noon, it is still hot. After coming out for so long, she was so hot all over. Quickly walked back to the room and sat on the Kong, blowing a fan. After thinking about it, I want to take the small table out of the space and have another stew and a chicken noodles in soup. A small table is the type of computer desk that can be placed on the bed and put away. The strong taste of chicken soup made Mo Yun swallow his saliva, which was an instinctive reaction of his body. In my memory, I only eat meat on particularly important holidays, and I rarely eat eggs, not to mention meat. Mo Yunqing could not finish a large bowl of chicken soup noodles, so she took a clean bowl and chopsticks, sandwiched the noodles, filled some soup and some chicken, and put the chicken soup noodles into the space. By the way, I also took out the TV dramas I didn't finish watching last night and ate them while watching. After finishing a small bowl of noodles and drinking some soup, I was almost 80% full. It's already past 3 o'clock, and by now the sun is slowly not as big. The villagers have all gone to work. Mo Yunqing thought for a moment and put away his things. He took a hat, a bamboo basket, and a knife before sneaking up the mountain. Why is it stealing? Because if the villagers see her, they won't let her go. They all care and do it for her good. Before returning, although Mo Yunqing couldn't say that the conditions were very good, the system also took good care of her. And at that time, it could be said that it was later generations, and she had never seen what the mountains of the 1970s looked like. In addition, after reading many historical novels, it is said that there are many treasures in the mountains during this era, such as herbs. Before she came, she also bought a lot of medicine from the pharmacy and even arranged for someone to get some ginseng or something. There are many types, but not many portions. And the herbs in the mountains are all pure wild, with high efficacy and value in all aspects. He is a fool who doesn't take advantage of the advantages. Mo Yunqing left home and headed all the way to the back mountain. That's where the children in the village often plant pigweed and dig wild vegetables. At the foot of the mountain, Mo Yunqing followed the route he remembered in his mind and climbed up the mountain. The area near the foot of the mountain was almost wiped out. It was all caused by famine. Last year, the harvest was slightly better, and the villagers had to pick and water twice a day, 3 times a day. It was only through hard work that they managed to get better. Mo Yunqing walked up with his basket in hand. The grass on the upper half of the mountain appears to be taller than her. Although her body is malnourished now, it's still a little over 1.5 meters. Just as Mo Yunqing was looking around to see if he could find a wooden stick and hit the grass, he heard the sound of the system coming. On the left side of the host and on the other side of the tree, there is a wooden stick that perfectly meets the host's needs. Mo Yunqing paused for a moment, and as he walked over, he saw a tree branch the size of 2 fingers. Mo Yunqing took a knife and chopped off the excess tree branches, then threw the knife into space. Hold a wooden stick and hit the dense weeds several times. At this point, the system spoke again. The host can leave with peace of mind, there is no danger. Mo Yunqing raised his eyebrows slightly and asked, "Can you survey the surroundings to see if there is any danger?" System. Did the host forget? The system said it would protect the host, and I didn't tell the host that I have this ability. Upon hearing his last words, Mo Yunqing almost gave him a cold eye and said, "Hee hee." The system remembered it now, as if it had never been said before, and since bringing the host to the age of 10, she was able to take care of herself, and it seemed like she had never spoken to the host again. Inexplicably a bit awkward. He was a serious system and realized he had missed something. He immediately said, "It was a system failure, but the host can rest assured that the system is even more powerful than the host thought." Mo Yunqing never thought that the system could have any other functions. Now that he had explained it himself, she was surprised and asked, "Do you have any treasure hunting functions besides this one?" System. Of course there is, but this system is not a treasure hunting system, so. Mo Yunqing nodded and understood, which means he has this function, but it cannot match the treasure hunting ability of the Zheng Buying treasure hunting system. I understand. Can you help me check if there are any herbs around? Don't waste that piece of space. System. Okay, host. About 50 meters forward, there is a small piece of 5-leaf wall vine on the tree, which has the functions of dispelling wind and dampness, dispersing blood stasis and unblocking collaterals, detoxifying and reducing swelling. Mo Yunqing didn't understand this, but the system understood it, so she followed the direction of the system and walked over to transplant a whole 5-leaf wall vine into space according to the system's instructions. After more than 2 hours of wandering in the mountains, Mo Yunqing did not find any particularly valuable medicinal herbs, but found many common or difficult to find ones. It was getting late, and she didn't dare to stay any longer. She picked up some wild vegetables and walked back with a basket. Wild vegetables were deliberately dug, so if you run into the villagers on the way, you can have an excuse. As soon as she left the back mountain with her front foot, Tingyu and Xiao Qindong walked towards her from the direction of the ground. Tingyu looked up at the mountain and said, "Go up and see if we can have meat tonight." Xiao Qindong nodded and said, "Let's go." Halfway through, Xiao Qindong and Tingyu stopped at the same time. Xiao Qindong looked at the freshly broken grass leaves and said, "Someone has come." Tingyu nodded and looked around, guessing, maybe they came to the mountains to dig wild vegetables. "Let's go." Xiao Qindong nodded. When Yunqing was about to reach his doorstep, he stopped and felt embarrassed. Chu was still wearing a straw hat on his head and holding the key he had just taken out of his pocket. It looked like he had just returned. Upon hearing the sound, he turned his head and looked over, just in front of Yunqing's eyes. Looking at her with a straw hat on her head and a basket in her hand. Chu's face collapsed, and his bright eyes looked at her with complaints. Yun touched his nose with a guilty heart. Awkwardly, he said, "What a coincidence." Chu was almost angry and crying, and with a hint of grievance in his complaint, he said, "Ancestor, you secretly went up the mountain behind my back again." Yunqing felt even more embarrassed. She only said in the morning that she wouldn't do it again next time, and this day hasn't arrived yet. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Going to the Town, 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Going to the Town, 1. Yunqing cleared his throat and took a few steps forward, explaining with a serious expression, "Well, I can explain it. I'm going to dig wild vegetables." After speaking, feeling unconvinced, he added, "I didn't go too far, and I didn't go out for long. It was just a while, and after digging, I came back." Chu sighed slightly and said, "Next time." The words came to a stop. She only said these words this morning. Yunqing walked over and smiled, "All right, isn't it okay for me? I'm already much better, really. I'll be able to start work in a couple of days." Chu was not really angry, but worried about her. After all, she fainted from heatstroke the day before yesterday, and her pale face really scared her. "I'll forgive you this time, and next time I do, I'll really ignore you." Yunqing smiled and rubbed her hair with a touch of helplessness, saying, "Okay, I'll call you wherever I go next time, so you don't have to worry." Chu looked at Yunqing and spoke a little more arrogantly, "Then you can't deceive people." Yunqing nodded and said, "I won't deceive anyone." Chu smiled contentedly, but soon she controlled the curve of her mouth and said again, "Then I'll go back and cook. I really can't deceive anyone." Seeing her like this, Yunqing's smile deepened a bit and he said, "Okay, let's go, I'll go back too. This little girl is really easy to deceive." Chu just opened the door and went back, and Yunqing also turned around and went home. When I got home and put down my things, I walked over to wash my hands. When I was washing my face, I saw that my hands were a bit dirty. I thought I had touched the head of the female lead with this hand just now, but it's already dry, so it shouldn't have gotten on her hair. After washing your hands clean, first put away the things you washed in the yard today, put them away, take your clothes and take a shower, and then take a shower. Return to the room and sit on the kong, holding a dry towel to wipe the moisture off your hair until it dries up, at least not dripping. The hair on this body has reached the waist, with some dry and rough hair and some yellowing, which is caused by malnutrition. When her hair was semi-dry, Yunqing selected a light-flavored hair care essential oil from the space and applied it to her hair. The faint fragrance is very pleasant to smell. When I wake up tomorrow, there won't be much smell left. Not hungry yet, Yunqing took out his small desk and computer and opened the unfinished TV series. 7 o'clock in the evening. At this point it was already a bit dark, and it was also when everyone got off work. After putting away their farm tools, the three teenagers went to the back mountain together. The villagers didn't doubt what they were doing. After all, the weather was hot, and some people would go to the small river in the back mountain to take a shower. On the way, Xiao Qindong said happily, I was lucky in the afternoon and caught 2 rabbits and a wild chicken. I can start eating meat tonight. God knows, it's been a long time since he came here that he hasn't eaten meat. It's not that I can't afford it, it's just that living in a youth center is inconvenient. They all have good conditions, and they can still afford to eat meat a few times a month, but it's not convenient to eat it openly. So every time I cook meat, I have to sneak around. This is not the first time either. It is true that it is too hot on this day, and the work consumption during the day is too intense. Without eating some oil and water, even their iron bodies cannot withstand it. Fortunately, their production team is slightly better than other production teams, and there is no clear prohibition on hunting in the mountains. If you have the ability to hunt your own prey, just don't let anyone discover it. If it is discovered that it needs to be submitted, otherwise the hundreds of households in the village cannot justify it. Lingxu asked lightly, no one noticed, right? Xiao Qindong shook his head and said, no, we're both very careful. Lingxu nodded. Tingyu suddenly spoke up and asked, Uncle, is it time to go to the town to collect the letter tomorrow? Lingxu hummed and said, leave 2 rabbit legs behind later. I'll go to the captain's house. Tingyu and Xiao Qindong nodded and said, okay. They have to go to the town once a month to collect money, some from their families, and some from their cooperation with their own brothers. They earn full wages every day, and when they release food, they also receive a lot of food. Apart from leaving enough food for themselves, they will send out the excess. Extra income on an hourly basis. Yunqing looked outside as the sky had become much darker. He stretched lazily and took out the dinner he was going to have tonight from the space. While watching TV dramas and eating, after finishing the meal, simply tidy up and clean it before putting it in the space. I took out the food from the neighboring room yesterday and walked towards the village chief's house carrying a basket. The village head's house is in the middle of the village, and Yunqing's journey from the upper village to the middle of the village is only 4 to 5 minutes. When they arrived at the village chief's house, they had just finished dinner. The door was open, and the village chief and his son were sitting in the yard chatting. Seeing Yunqing coming, the village chief quickly got up and walked to the door, asking, Patriarch, you're here. What's up? Yunqing smiled lightly and took out a small bag of grain from the basket, handing it to the village chief. It's nothing, I'll bring the grain back to you. The village chief knew Yunqing's temperament, so he didn't say anything unnecessary. He took the rations handed over by Yunqing and asked, have you eaten them? Yunqing nodded and said, I've eaten it, there's nothing I need to do. I'll go back first. The village chief didn't say much either, after all, it was getting dark for a while and the road was difficult to walk. Cheng, then you should slow down, he said. Yunqing nodded and then left. After leaving, Yunqing did not go back, but went to the home of the brigade leader. Captain Li Xiuhua's daughter-in-law was still holding the dishes she had collected. When she saw Yunqing, she was taken aback for a moment. Then she quickly invited someone in and asked, Patriarch, why did you come so late and how is your health? Yunqing smiled lightly and said, it's already much better. Have you just finished your meal? Li Xiuhua nodded and said, yes, have you eaten it, Ancestor? Do you want to eat something at home? I'll make it for you. Yunqing shook his head and politely declined, explaining his intention. No need, I have eaten it. I came to ask if there is a cart going to town tomorrow. The captain came out of the room, greeted first, and then asked, do our ancestors want to go to town? Yunqing said, The captain said, there will be tomorrow at 5 o'clock in the morning. Yunqing nodded and said, okay, I'll wait at the village entrance tomorrow. After a few more pleasantries, Yunqing left the captain's house. It's already dark now. On the way back, I suddenly smelled the smell of grilled meat. At this moment, 3 tall boys walked across from each other. The sky was a bit dark, and Mo Yunqing couldn't see the face of the person walking by clearly. Tingyu immediately recognized it. "Miss Mo, it's so late. Are you coming back from outside?" Mo Yunqing sounded a bit familiar with the voice, as if he had seen the male lead's voice in the morning. Jiqing. Tingyu responded, "It's me, Miss Mo." Mo Yunqing only saw the three of them clearly when he approached. "Just came out of the captain's house." Tingyu nodded and said, "It's getting late, so don't disturb Miss Mo." "It's getting dark, Miss Mo, be slow." Mo Yunqing nodded blankly and said, "Thank you." End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Going to the Town, 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Going to the Town, 2. When Mo Yunqing left, Xiao Qindong turned to look over. "Do you also know this?" Tingyu shook his head and said lightly, "I've seen you this morning." Xiao Qindong clearly didn't believe it. "I met you at night and greeted them so skillfully." With a hint of doubt in his tone, Tingyu said, "Is there a problem?" Xiao Qindong choked and shook his head in a sarcastic tone, "No." After thinking for a moment, Tingyu still felt it was necessary to remind Xiao Qindong, a foolish person, that girl just now was the older ancestor of the younger generation in the village. Xiao Qindong was surprised and said, "Is that her?" Lingxu was also a bit surprised. "They have been here for quite some time, more than 2 months. I have heard of them, but I have never encountered them." Tingyu nodded and said, "So be careful when you speak in the future. The team leader's family and the village head's family have great respect for that person. Xiao Qindong is a good person, but sometimes he has a weak personality." Tingyu reminded him. "I'm just afraid he might offend someone." Xiao Qindong patted his chest confidently and said with some emotion, "Don't worry, it's just that I didn't expect a young girl to have such a high rank in the village." To be honest, when Tingyu found out this morning, he was completely shocked. Despite the seemingly calm group, his heart was actually bursting with popcorn. "Yeah, at first I thought it had to be similar to or even bigger than us, but I didn't expect it to be so small." On the way back, Mo Yunqing asked the system, "Is the person next to the male lead who looks a bit similar to him his brother?" System. "No, that person's name is Lingxu, he is the male lead's biological uncle." Mo Yunqing hesitated for a moment and said, "So young." System. Lao Lizi. Mo Yunqing nodded and took a quick glance during the day, only remembering that she seemed quite good looking. "I didn't pay much attention to the details, but since the male lead is so good looking, as his own uncle, he naturally looks not bad." After returning home, washing up, watching TV dramas for a while, I rested. Early the next morning, Mo Yunqing got up at 4 o'clock. It wasn't even dawn outside. After sitting on the Kong for a while, his mind cleared up a bit, and he got up to change clothes, wash himself up, have breakfast, and then took a straw hat and a basket with him. He also brought a bamboo tube of water and finished packing it up. Before leaving, he thought about taking out a few boiled eggs from the space and putting them in his pocket. After locking the door, walked towards the village entrance. When we arrived at the village entrance, we hadn't seen the captain come over yet, so it seemed like we had to wait for a while. At this moment, 3 boys walked by not far away. It was Tingyu and them. From a long distance, they saw a girl with a big fried dough twists braid and a basket beside her. Xiao Qindong chuckled and said, "Someone is even earlier than us." Tingyu said with some uncertainty, "It seems like Miss Mo." Xiao Qindong looked at Tingyu with admiration on his face and said, "Old He, you can do it. Your brain is getting better and better." Tingyu glanced at him speechlessly, but his words didn't sound like good words. Mo Yunqing also heard the sound of them approaching and turned around to meet the seemingly gentle but indifferent gaze of Lingxu. Tingyu greeted Mo Yunqing with a smile and said, "Miss Mo, we meet again." Mo Yunqing nodded with a faint smile and said, "Jiqing." Xiao Qindong waved his hand and greeted Mo Yunqing with a smile. "Hello, Miss Mo, my name is Xiao Qindong." Mo Yunqing was momentarily stunned, then nodded with a faint smile and said, "Xiao Jiqing." Xiao Qindong asked a useless question. "Are you also going to town?" Mo Yunqing nodded and said, Tingyu was afraid that Xiao Qindong would talk nonsense again, so he quickly said, "This is my uncle, also surnamed He." Mo Yunqing was puzzled. The male lead was a bit enthusiastic. Although he was puzzled in his heart, his face remained unchanged, and even his smile was polite. "Hello, comrade He." Lingxu nodded slightly with a hint of warmth in his tone. "Hello, comrade Mo." After chatting for a while, the captain came over with his son on a cart. Mo Yunqing looked at the burlap bags on the ox cart and remembered that the production team in Majia village pays public grain every 6 months. Today happens to be the day. The platoon leader pulled the cart and got off it. Tingyu and the others greeted him, and the platoon leader nodded before walking up to Mo Yunqing and shouting, "Ancestor." Mo Yunqing nodded and said, His 2 sons also shouted along, "Ancestor." Mo Yunqing also nodded and said, The captain reached out and took the basket beside Mo Yunqing's feet, saying, "I'll put the things on the car for you." Mo Yunqing nodded and said, "Okay, thank you." The captain shook his head and said, "No trouble." Tingyu and Xiao Qindong were already dumbfounded. It was the first time they had seen the captain's gentle attitude. The next second, I saw the captain turn his head and loudly say to the 2 dumbfounded guys, "What are you looking at? You're not getting in the car yet." Xiao Qindong and Tingyu both shook their spirits and quickly nodded, "Here we are." Lingxu had already boarded the car and sat down. "This road is not close. It takes 2 hours to walk, and 1.5 for a cart. Take advantage of the fact that it's not yet dawn and the sun hasn't come out yet." As he got into the car, Xiao Qindong muttered softly, "So the captain also has moments of gentleness." Carrying the ox cart was the second son of the captain, Mo Xinghua. Upon hearing Xiao Qindong's words, he smiled. "My dad just has a slightly louder voice, but he's actually quite easy to talk to." Upon hearing this, Xiao Qindong immediately leaned over and asked, "Is the captain treating you the same way?" Mo Xinghua nodded and smiled, saying, "You'll know after a while." Xiao Qindong shrugged helplessly and said, "I may have gotten used to it a bit." When they first arrived, they did think the squad leader was quite aggressive, but later found out that he also treated the villagers the same way. "I wasn't used to it at first, but now I'm a bit used to it." Mo Xinghua smiled and said, "Ha ha ha." Mo Yunqing and Captain are in the first ox cart in front, Xiao Qindong and Tingyu are in the last one, and Lingxu is in the middle. Upon hearing laughter coming from behind, Mo Yunqing turned his head in confusion to look. The result happened to align with Lingxu's eyes again. There was a momentary awkwardness. Mo Yunqing calmly withdrew his gaze. By the time we arrived in town, it was already daylight. The captain stopped the ox cart and said to Mo Yunqing, "Patriarch, go buy what you want to buy first, and stay here at noon to gather." Mo Yunqing nodded and said, "Okay. Get off the ox cart, take out 3 eggs from the basket and place them next to the captain, then leave." The captain saw it and quickly shouted, "Our ancestors are too valuable." Mo Yunqing said without looking back, "Take it." The captain looked at the 3 eggs in his hand and was filled with complexity for a moment. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Black Market. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9 Black Market. This egg is a rare item, even our ancestors prepared it for them. Mo Xinghua walked over with a puzzled expression and said, "Dad, what's wrong?" The platoon leader took action and handed the eggs to the 2 brothers, saying, "It was given by our ancestors." Mo Xinghua was startled and said, "Dad, this egg is too valuable, isn't it?" The captain said angrily, "I don't know, you don't know the temperament of our ancestors. Mo Xinghua scratched his hair and asked, "What should I do?" The captain sighed and said, "Take it and let your mother prepare something that our ancestors love when we go back." Mo Xinghua and Mo Xingyi nodded and said, Mo Yunqing followed the route in his memory and went to a supply and marketing cooperative, buying some kerosene and some cloth. Then she left the supply and marketing cooperative, and just buying these two things almost drained the money and tickets left by her parents. System, where is the black market in this town? The system immediately provides the location. To the south, the host is going to the black market. The system suggests that the host dress up. Mo Yunqing let out a sigh and asked the system to find a hidden corner for her. I changed into a new set of clothes in the space and used Chinese face-changing techniques. Now no one can recognize her. She also put on a backpack that the shop owner gave her when she was shopping. I took some rice, pork, chicken, duck, and lamb. Not much, just so she can carry it on her back. She usually takes pork with a lot of fat. Follow the route indicated by the system all the way towards the black market. Mo Yunqing walked through the black market with a backpack on his back for a while, then found a corner to put down the backpack and lowered his straw hat. After a while, an old man walked slowly over and sat against the wall not far from Mo Yunqing. The old man lowered his voice and said, "Young man, do you have any meat?" Mo Yunqing pretended not to understand his words and said, "Grandpa, I'm waiting here." The old man understood his vigilance and spoke again, "Don't worry, I really want it." At this moment, the system spoke up and said, "Don't worry, the host is not a scammer, nor is he here to test." After listening to the system's words, Mo Yunqing felt relieved and asked Grandpa, "How much do you want?" The master asked, "How much do you have?" Mo Yunqing raised his eyebrows slightly, as if he could eat a lot from his words. 5 pounds of pork, with plenty of fat. As soon as the old man heard this, he immediately said, "I'll take it all." "Do you want money or tickets? Do you want both?" Afraid of slowing down for a second, the meat and people ran away. Mo Yunqing was slightly stunned, but quickly regained his composure and said, "Sure, money and tickets are fine, but we need to trade in a different place." Grandpa also understood that this was not a place for trading, and after thinking for a moment, he said, "Okay, you can rest assured and come with me." Mo Yunqing hesitated when she heard of following him. System. The host can rest assured that everything has a system in place. Mo Yunqing nodded and said, "Okay. Grandpa, let's go first." Mo Yunqing didn't catch up until he walked a little further away. After taking a few turns and crossing several alleys, the old man walked to a closed courtyard and knocked on the door, which opened. Grandpa waved to Mo Yunqing. System. No danger, the host can go with confidence. Mo Yunqing quickly walked over and walked into the yard, only to see an old lady with white hair besides the old master. Seeing Mo Yunqing turn around and enter the room. After closing the door, the old man said, "You can rest assured now. Do you have any food here besides meat?" Mo Yunqing nodded and said, "We have rice, but the price." The old man interrupted Mo Yunqing's words and said, "I know. Can you give me a quote?" Mo Yunqing listened to the old man's words and nodded, putting down the basket and taking out pork and rice from it. "This is polished rice, young man. How much do you have in your hands?" Mo Yunqing tentatively said, "There's still a few dozen pounds left." The old man pondered for a moment, gritted his teeth and said, "I'll take it all." Mo Yunqing was stunned and took it all. The price of polished rice is even more expensive than ordinary rice. However, she quickly regained her senses and thought that the old man was not short of money, saying, "The price of polished rice is 1.21 jin, pork is 1.5 jin, 5 jin is 7.5 yuan, and this bag of polished rice has 5 jin and 6 yuan, adding up to 13.5 yuan. The old man nodded and handed Mo Yunqing 13 and 5 yuan, then said, "If you come back to the black market in the future, please bring me more polished rice. Mo Yunqing hesitated for a moment and nodded, but still said, I'm not sure when I'll come, but if I do, I'll bring it to you. The old man also understood and nodded, it's okay, just remember. Later, Mo Yunqing left the old man's house and went around the black market twice. After buying some things and having some money in tickets on hand, he left. She also went back to the supply and marketing cooperative and bought 2 headbands, one for herself and the other for Mo Chu Chu. Post office. After collecting the money, Xiao Qindong smiled and said, it's been a long time since I ate the meat buns from state-owned restaurants. Let's go and have a meal. Tingyu also looked happily at Lingxu and saw that he didn't speak. Tingyu knew he had no objections and nodded, The 3 of them walked towards the state-owned hotel as soon as they left the post office. They came just in time, and now everything has just come out. Tingyu and Lingxu each asked for 3 big meat buns and a bowl of noodles in soup. The chefs at state-owned restaurants are very skilled, and the steamed buns they make provide enough meat filling, making them very satisfying to eat. Noodles in soup are also strong. After finishing eating, Xiao Qindong leans back on the chair and touches his stomach, with a satisfied face. Comfortable. Although Tingyu and Lingxu are not as exaggerated as Xiao Qindong, it can be seen that they are both in a good mood. After a while, Lingxu and Tingyu stood up and said, let's go. They were just about to leave when Mo Yunqing walked in with a backpack on his back. Tingyu was somewhat surprised when he saw Mo Yunqing. He originally wanted to call her Miss Mo, but remembered that his uncle called her Comrade Mo, and it was not good to call her Miss Mo himself. Comrade Mo. Mo Yunqing had just told the waiter that he wanted 5 big meat buns and gave him money and food tickets when he heard Tingyu's voice. He looked up and saw the 3 of them. Nodding in greeting, he said, He Jiqing, Comrade Xiao Jiqing. As soon as the words fell, the waiter handed the packaged big meat bun to Mo Yunqing. Mo Yunqing took it and put it in the basket. Lingxu suddenly spoke up and asked, Comrade Mo, have you finished buying things? Tingyu and Xiao Qindong thought they had heard wrong and looked at Lingxu with a shocked expression on their faces. Shen synchronous thought. Uncle actually cares about others. Mo Yunqing hesitated for a moment and nodded, I've bought it all. Lingxu said, then let's go together. As soon as these words were spoken, Xiao Qindong and Tingyu looked at Lingxu with disbelief on their faces. Mo Yunqing didn't think much about it. They came together, and it's normal for them to meet and leave together. So he nodded and said, okay. Dear babies, there are 8 wishes for mooncakes. Happiness, happiness, harmony, contentment, fulfillment, auspiciousness, and health. Happy Mid-Autumn Festival. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Lingxu. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Lingxu, Tingyu and Xiao Qindong exchanged a glance, looking at Mo Yunqing and Lingxu. What is the situation? I don't know, do I? Mo Yunqing and Lingxu have already left. These 2 are still dumbfounded in place. After regaining his senses, he immediately chased after him. They arrived at the agreed place, and soon the captain and his team arrived. The captain shouted, Ancestor. The 2 brothers of Mo Xinghua said, Ancestor. Mo Yunqing nodded and said, The captain spoke up and said, everyone is here, get in the car and go back. Don't delay starting work in the afternoon. As soon as they finished speaking, they all got on their respective carts, as if they had come over in the morning. Mo Yunqing is sitting on the ox cart raised by the brigade leader. Along the way, I didn't say anything because the sun was too bright and hot. It was already noon when I returned to the village. Mo Yunqing carried something back and did not meet any villagers on the way. But it's also normal, it's cooler at home on hot days. Mo Yunqing had just opened the door with the key and walked in, ready to close it when he heard someone shouting, Ancestor, wait a moment. Mo Yunqing's doubts poked his head out. Seeing two young men who looked 5 points similar, they pulled a cart over. There are also several bundles of firewood loaded on the cart. Mo Yunqing remembered yesterday when Mo Chu said she would go back and tell his brother to help them get a few bundles of firewood. The young man pulling the cart smiled and said, "Ancestor, it's clear that your family has run out of firewood, so we went to the mountains to get some for you." "Thank you for your hard work." Mo Yunqing nodded with a faint smile. Mo Ligua shook his head and smiled foolishly. "It's not hard." Mo Yunqing leaned over and asked them to help move the firewood inside. After putting the things in place, I made 2 bowls of sweet water with added sugar for them. She also took out the headband she bought for Mo Chu and took out 2 of the big meat buns she bought today. Mo Yunqing walked out with 2 bowls of water and handed them. "Drink some water and go back." Mo Ligua and Mo Lian washed their hands and took it with a smile, saying, "Thank you, Ancestor. I thought it was just ordinary cold water, and it tasted sweet in my mouth." Both of them were stunned. Both of them were in their mouths but couldn't spit it out. They had also drunk in their bowls and couldn't return it. "Ancestor, this." Mo Yunqing interrupted him and said, "There's still some at home, just a little sugar. Don't worry." Mo Ligua and Mo Lian understood the meaning behind Mo Yun's love words. The two of them don't know what to say. Mo Yunqing changed the topic and asked, Chu is at home, right?" Mo Lian nodded and said, "At home." Mo Yunqing nodded and said, "Then I'll go find her later." Mo Ligua said, "Okay, let's go back first." The two of them washed the dishes clean, put them away for Mo Yunqing, and then pulled the cart back. After Mo Yunqing put away his things, he took 2 large meat buns wrapped in oil paper and a headband and went out. The two families are next door, and Mo Yunqing just took a few steps outside to get there. I knocked on the door and the back door quickly opened. The person who came to open the door was Yunqing, the mother of the female protagonist. Seeing Mo Yunqing's smile on her face, she said, "Patriarch, you're here." Mo Yunqing nodded lightly and asked, Is Chu there?" "In the room, please come in," said Yunqing. A man walked out, who was the father of the female protagonist, Mo Zhongfu. With a simple and honest expression on his face, he saw Mo Yunqing shouting, "Ancestor." Mo Yunqing nodded and walked into the speaking room. Mo Chu came out of the room. "Ancestors." While shouting, he walked briskly to Mo Yunqing's side. Mo Yunqing took out a red headband and handed it to Mo Chu, saying, "This is the headband for you." Mo Chu looked at the headband in her hand and asked, "Did you go to town?" Mo Yunqing nodded and took out 2 meat bags from the basket and stuffed them into Yunqing's hand. "Go buy something in town, this is for you, these 2 are for you." Yunqing smelled the fragrance and looked down at the 2 plump white buns, saying, "This is too expensive. You can keep it for yourself to eat." He was about to give the steamed buns back to Mo Yunqing, but Mo Yunqing took a few steps back and said, "Ligua and Lian have helped me a lot, and you usually take good care of me. I bought this item specifically. As the saying goes, elders cannot refuse to give it, so I took it." Yunqing and Mo Zhongfu, the couple, had never read, but they understood the sentence that the elderly cannot refuse. It's not a matter of delivering it back at once, nor is it a matter of not delivering it back. When they were stunned, Mo Yunqing left a sentence and went back. "I've been bumping all morning and my bones are sore. I'll go back and rest." Upon returning home, Mo Yunqing closed the door, washed his hands and feet, and then entered the room. Then it's time to take a shower in the space, wash and hang the clothes outside, then return to the room and take out a fan to drink corn rib soup, as well as a shiitake mushroom and chicken rice while enjoying the show. She is comfortable and leisurely now, and the hostess next door is not calm anymore. 5 people sat on the kong, looking at the 2 meat buns on the table, with a headache on their faces. Yunqing looked at her son, then at her own man, and then at her daughter, with a worried expression on her face. "What's wrong with this?" Mo Chu frowned and said, "I don't know." Mo Zhongfu sighed and said, "Then let's keep it. We also know the temper of our ancestors. If we return it, if we want to help in the future, she probably won't let it go." Mo Ligua agreed and said, "Dad is right." Mo Lien and Mo Chu also nodded along. They were neighbors and had frequent interactions, so they naturally understood Mo Yunqing's temperament. When He Xiuying saw the head of the family, her sons and daughters all said the same, she could only follow suit and say, "Then keep it." Despite saying so, no one touched these two big meat buns. He Xiuying suddenly remembered something and said as she got off the Kong, "I remember there were still some mung beans at home. I'll make a pot of sugar water and bring some to my ancestors, which will just relieve the heat." After finishing speaking, I went out to busy myself. Mo Zhongfu shouted loudly, "Boil more, let's have some too." "I understand," said He Xiuying's voice from outside educated youth points. Xiao Qindong and He Tingyu looked at He Lingxu with a hesitant expression, and it had been almost an hour since he returned. They didn't dare to ask, but they were also curious. How could the seemingly gentle but actually indifferent uncle suddenly care about a little girl? But they have the courage to be curious, not the courage to ask. So there was a scene like this, one calmly reading a book, and the two occasionally looking at him with a hesitant expression, wanting to ask but not daring to ask. He Lingxu just didn't see it, anyway these two kids wouldn't dare to ask. After reading for a while, He Lingxu took a nap. He Tingyu and Xiao Qindong sighed and fell asleep shortly after. 3:30 p.m. After He Lingxu woke up, he woke up the two of them, and then they started again. He Lingxu just ignored it. "Sorry for being late because I took some time to have a meal in the middle." End of this chapter.